Alright guys, today we are continuing our build series on the 2008 Trailblazer that you see sitting behind me. Our goal with the car is to build the ultimate street car, and I wanted to have heat, AC, and a few other creature comforts, and the goal is to make this thing go 10 O's in the quarter mile, because with a 2008 and later vehicle, that is totally legal without a single bar in the car. So today we're going to talk about the transmission plans, so let's show you what we got. And here is our plan. What you are looking at is an 8 HP-70 transmission. And this would have come in a Dodge Charger or Challenger or something of that sort. And the reason that I am so interested in this transmission is because they use this transmission behind the HELLCAT engines. And if you guys have been living under a rock, those engines make 707 horsepower from the factory. So these transmissions are obviously good for some abuse, and it seems that guys are getting around 700 wheel horsepower through them fairly reliably on totally stock transmissions. Now the nice thing about this transmission is it already has lockup and double overdrive, so it should be great for the highway miles, and that's really what I wanted in this car. Now I could have gone with a 4L80E like we've done in the past, but we've had mixed results with those, and frankly I just wanted to try something a little bit different. Now there are a few challenges with this particular transmission that we need to deal with, so let's talk about it. First off, you will notice that there is no shift lever mechanism on the side of the transmission. There is this lever here, but that is literally just a park lever. Literally it defaults to the park position, and this would release the parking pawl and allow the transmission to go. The way that you tell this thing to go into forward, reverse, and go through all the gears is entirely done through the CAN bus. So there are a couple wires that need to be hooked up on this plug down here, and you pretty much just need power, ground, and your CAN connections, and an ECU that can talk to this thing. Now, as I discussed in the last video, we are going to definitely have a standalone ECU on this car, and that brings me to how we're going to make this thing work. Max ECU actually offers a flash for the TCU in this transmission, the transmission control unit, and what that allows you to do is to very much simplify the control of the transmission, and I hear that it's a little more robust and better at holding power. I'm sure they manipulate the pressures and whatnot to get the thing to hold up to more abuse. And it also allows it to talk to a max ECU so that we can control this thing. So I already have somebody who has offered to help out with reflashing the TCU on this thing. So that is what we are going to do. And some other attractive features about this thing is it has a built-in trans brake. Without having to do anything with like an aftermarket valve body or anything like that, you can have access to, essentially a trans brake in the car, and I'm a big fan of that. Now, the first gear ratio on this transmission is pretty aggressive. I think it's like a 4.5 to 1, 4.6 to 1, something like that. And I was initially worried about that. After watching the guys who participated in the Roadkill Nights sort of YouTuber shootout that they had with the Hurricane engines, I'm not as concerned. The guys from the Street Racing channel, they thought that the gear ratio in the car was going to be a problem, especially with the starting line ratio. So they ended up putting, I believe, a 350 gear in the car to sort of tame the starting line ratio down, and they came to regret that decision and thought that it needs like a 370 or something like that in order to get the thing to move off of the line. So I think we can definitely work with this thing, but I also have another goodie that we will talk about later. Another challenge here is the output shaft of the transmission. It is set up for a CV style drive shaft. I'm not a huge fan of that, but I actually bought this transmission from somebody who had swapped it into another vehicle, and he had this for sale as well. This converts to a standard U-joint style setup, and it just bolts on there to the output, and that should be able to solve my problem. I will need a drive shaft that has a collapsible portion to it, but that shouldn't be too bad. I'm not very worried about that. You know, that's easy at that point. Another challenge that we need to deal with is the bell housing bolt pattern. Obviously, Dodges didn't come with Atlas bell housing bolt patterns. Believe it or not, yeah, different companies use different flanges. These transmissions are set up to run behind a Gen 3 Hemi. And if you guys didn't know, the Gen 3 Hemi has the same bell housing bolt pattern as a small block Mopar. As you guys know, we already have the flange layout for the Atlas. You can check that out on the wiki. We have it posted up there. That brings us to this fancy piece of billet right here. I already had this machined up. This goes from the Atlas pattern with a set of flange bolts to the Mopar pattern, which is these bolts right here. This was a little bit tricky because the Mopar dowel pin location sort of overlapped with the GM dowel pin location, so it had to be very precisely machined. This should solve all of our problems. We may have to notch the bell housing just slightly here for the starter, but you know, that's very minor. I've already bolted this up to the transmission and the engine, and it looks like that all of the bolt holes are in the right location. However, there's a few tweaks that I want to make to this thing, and I am definitely interested in offering this thing for sale once I finalize the design and verify that this transmission works. So if you guys want to do the same swap, that will be available at some point. Now, the fancy bit of kit that I was talking about earlier is what is inside this box right here. If you guys didn't know, Circle D actually already makes stall converters for the 8 HP transmissions, and here it is. This is a 4,000 stall unit that my dad picked up off of Facebook Marketplace for me. And I received some advice from somebody who has run these transmissions, and he said to get the loosest converter you can. He bought a 3400 stall, and the thing only stalls to like 2,000 RPM for him, if I remember right. So it's definitely something that you want to err on the side of loose. The factory converters are very, very tight. They apparently will only stall like 1,200 RPMs, and that's just not going to work in a turbo application. So I am very happy that we were able to find this with low miles and with a 4,000 stall. I think it's going to work out really well for us. And it looks like Hobbs is a fan of it as well. Silly cat. In addition to the transmission, one of the things I'm excited to be able to access with a Max ECU is the CAN bus. All modern vehicles have what is called the CAN bus. Basically, there are two communication wires which run all over the vehicle and communicate with various modules in the vehicle. And what's really cool about that is there's a lot of information that is flying back and forth on these devices. And it would be really cool to have access to that data, you know, for, you know, uses. So I've rigged up kind of a test example here that I'd like to show you guys, and I think you'll think that it is pretty cool. Alright, so I have my Max ECU software open here. I have a Max ECU Mini sitting in the center console. And what a lot of people probably don't know is you can actually access the CAN bus via the OBD2 connector. What is really cool about the Max ECU software is they have what is called the CAN analyzer. Basically, you can just sit there and listen and see all incoming and outgoing CAN messages on that particular bus. Now, what's super cool about that is I can just do stuff like hit the throttle and see if there's any values on the CAN bus that change. So let's give it a shot. I'm going to floor it and let off. Floor it and let off. And what we notice is that this one right here goes up and down when I hit the throttle, and then these two down here sort of lag a little bit and almost sort of catch themselves. This, I believe, is the pedal position, and this is the throttle position. This is an e-throttle equipped vehicle, so it will detect the pedal movement and then command the throttle to move accordingly. So from there, what is really cool in the software is I can set up what is called a CAN input. Now, I've already gone through and set this up. Basically, you set up which ID that you want to listen to. What is cool is now, when I floor the throttle, I have an input to my ECU that tells it that when the throttle is 0 and when the throttle is 100. If you haven't figured it out already, what is super cool about that is I can save a bunch of inputs and outputs on my Max ECU, which will allow me to use them for more interesting features. There is no reason to burn multiple inputs into the ECU for pedal position when I could just grab it off the CAN bus. The same is true for coolant temp. Why would I burn an input when I could use that for something more interesting like oil temp or, you know, what have you? And basically, instead of having to wire tons and tons of wires, you only have to wire 2, and you can get all this information with doing very little work. Now, other ECUs could support these type of features, but the software is not there to let you set it up. So you have to beg and plead with the people who write the software for the ECU and hope that they will listen to you and let you, you know, do what you want to do. That usually doesn't go well. And what I love about the Max ECU so much is I can just hook things up, listen to stuff, and just make stuff happen. I don't need to talk to anybody. I don't need to beg anybody to implement a very simple feature. All the work is on me. I can sit there for hours in my car and play around with stuff and make stuff happen. It's super cool. Next, I'm going to show you how I'm going to figure out where the coolant temp sensor and the manifold air temperature sensors are, since why not grab them off the CAN bus if they're there? Alright guys, to figure out which one is the coolant temp sensor, what I've done is I've unplugged the coolant temp sensor and then just plugged it into a spare sensor that I had laying around. And we are going to figure out which input it is with fire. So basically I'm going to hold this lighter on the sensor and watch which value goes up. I've actually already done that, and I've determined it to be this one right here. So if I just hold the flame on there for a little bit and then let it go, you can see that value goes up quite a bit. It's up to 8F. Now these are in what is called hexadecimal. So if I take that 8F and punch it into my calculator, it will convert that to decimal right here. And that is 143. So if we look at our dash, we can see it's right around that 140-ish number, so we know that one, that's the right input, and two, it is in Fahrenheit, so we can set up another CAN input on the max ECU, and we can get our coolant temp off of the CAN bus. Alright, so now I have a CAN input set up to that address that we saw. I have the appropriate numbers in there, and you can see it is showing 93 degrees at the moment. So if I hit this thing with the lighter again, we should see that number start to go up. And we definitely do. Now I'm gonna let off. And we can also get the sensor really cold with a cup of ice water. And it's still making its way down, but you can see it's down to 47 degrees. So I'm gonna see if this settles out to 32, which it should be right around there in a glass of water. So that should tell us if we have the right scaling and if we're getting the right value. Another thing that I found that was super cool is I should be able to use my original shifter with the 8 HP transmission. And I should be able to pull the gear position right off of the CAN bus as well. If we look at one of our registers here, you can see that as I move the shifter, it changes values. So I'm going to go through the gears here and keep an eye on that. So there is reverse. There is neutral, there is drive. This is super useful because the 8 HP does not have any shifter linkage, and you have to send all of the gear commands over via CAN. But I should be able to use the original shifter in the car to send the commands to the transmission. And I think that's super cool. All right, guys, the next thing that we need to talk about is something that's going to be a little bit controversial. And that is, we're going to be converting the Trailblazer to two-wheel drive. Now, this car is a four-wheel drive equipped vehicle, and the issue I have with four-wheel drive is we've done high horsepower front-wheel drive stuff in the past, and I can say we did a lot of cool stuff. We got the t-shirt, and frankly, I don't know if I'm quite ready to do that again. It seems like a lot of the four-wheel drive guys are dealing with similar issues that we dealt with on the Talon, and that is torque steer. Basically, the front diff slash steering geometry situation will cause the thing to want to tear the steering wheel out of your hand. And I'm just not really up for that on this one. I'd like this to be a easy to drive street car. So we're going to convert it to a two-wheel drive. Additionally, going to two-wheel drive is going to lose us a lot of weight, and we're really not going to be dealing with traction limitations on this particular setup. You know, I only want to go 10-0s with this car. Sure. It would be cool to make some fast street hits with the thing, but you know, I'm not really that kind of guy. I'm not into the street racing stuff, and frankly, if I want to go fast, I'm going to do it at a track. So let me show you what my dad and I have come up with for our plan. All right, I just removed the spindle and upper control arm from the Trailblazer, and I want to show you guys kind of what we are planning to do here. This is the original spindle and control arm setup. You can see that it is set up here with a hub with a spline center, and it is set up so that you can drive the front wheels, obviously. It also has this stamped steel upper control arm, and you can see that it has a ball joint that is on the spindle and actually spears up into the upper control arm, which is a little bit odd. Additionally, it has the 6x whatever bolt circle wheels, so finding a set of wheels for this thing would be a little bit difficult, especially since I want to run some skinny tires up front. So let's move on to the new plan. our new plan is to run F-body stuff. The nice thing about F-body stuff is it allows for good upgradability in the future. And as you can see, that spindle looks an awful lot like the Trailblazer spindle. What we have here is a 4th gen Camaro spindle. The next challenge is, what do we do about our A-arms? The ball joint is on the spindle, on the original control arm, and this is set up for the ball joint to be in the control arm. I got to looking around on the internet, and I found this. This is designed for a G-body. What I found from laying pictures over one another is these control arms are very similar to the Trailblazer control arms, with enough room in between here to be able to use the original mounting interface on the Trailblazer. As for the lower control arm, we're going to have to get a little bit creative, but I'm not too worried about that. But again, this will allow us to get a more commonly available bolt pattern, and finding wheels will be a lot more affordable, and definitely open us up to some more fancy looking wheel setups. Alright guys, you're going to have to bear with me a little bit here. Obviously this looks a little bit goofy with that short of a tire, but we should be able to get a taller tire on here and really fill out the wheel well a little bit more. But I have sort of mocked the thing up with the G-body A-arm up here, and I found out that the G-body ball joint does not interface with the F-body spindle. So we'll have to figure that out. Maybe we'll go to the F-body ball joint on the G-body spindle, but we'll sort that out. As you can see, the F-body spindle fits in there pretty good. We're also going to change out the front strut to a lighter weight unit, and obviously the lower control arm needs to be reworked, and the steering needs reworked as well. Since we're converting the car to a rear sump, we need to get all that junk out of there anyways, so that's not really an unforeseen problem. But I think it fits in there pretty decent. It seems pretty flush with the outside of the body. From here, I think we are going to use the F-body lower control arm, and we will make brackets that are in here that will be set up to accept the F-body control arm. So it should be F-body lower control arm with a G-body upper control arm, and we'll figure out our ball joint deal. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with how it is laying out. Also, I think the big tire in the back and skinny up front, that's always been my preferred look to a vehicle. I've always thought that that would be a cooler look, and I definitely like the way that this is coming out. Once we get a taller tire on the front, it really is going to look pretty hot, and I think it is going to come out pretty cool. So with that, make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.